and we will get started. All right, so welcome everyone to our session using Flipgrid to enhance nursing education. I'm Kevin Tressler. I'm the instructional designer at the School of Nursing, and we'll go through and introduce ourselves here. So we'll start with Dr. Reyna.
Hi, I'm Barbara Reyna. I am a coordinator of one of our specialty programs for the neonatal nurse practitioner program. And we've been working together now for a couple of years, trying to look at different ways of presenting information to the students.
Okay, Dr. Eastham.
Hi, I'm Linda Eastham. I am also a coordinator, this time for the Family Nurse Practitioner Program. And we, as Barbara said, have been working together for a few years now. And so we're getting more comfortable with things and happy to share our experiences.
All right. And Dr. Kelly.
My name is Tracy Kelly. I work as the coordinator in the Pediatric Acute Care Nurse Practitioner Program, and really looking forward to talking to you about some opportunities for how to use Flipgrid in your curriculum.
Great. And so as we go through, I'm going to kind of share an overview of how we got involved using Flipgrid, what our design and setup process is and was, and what we've seen so far. And then each of the professors who are joining me today will share their experience, some insights, and then if you have any specific questions for them, you can ask them as we go through, and if not, we'll hold the rest of the questions until the end. We'd also hopefully have some time maybe to share some examples and show you the setup of that as well. So I'll go ahead and move us through, and if at any time for some reason you aren't able to see the slides or something goes on, just let me know. Feel free to unmute and let me know. So if you have never used Flipgrid or you aren't familiar with it, Flipgrid is a video-based discussion tool that UVA as a school, or I'm sorry, as a university, as a system, does support. So it's not just our school, it's not just the School of Nursing. This is a university-wide tool. And the reason that's really significant and a great positive is because that means it has been through the security process to make sure that everything is secure as it should be. The students can use their UVA sign-on information, so they don't have to carry a separate password or try to remember what it was. It automatically will connect with their UVA account. And then the integration that we can have within several of the LMSs across grounds is useful. And one thing in that, though, with the integration is it is not directly integrated into Colab. And what I mean by that is that if you go to Colab, you're not going to see a specific plugin that means Flipgrid functions within the site. So Flipgrid does function. You can put a link into your Colab site, but Flipgrid stands alone as a web-based or application-based platform. And we have students that use Flipgrid on mobile devices predominantly because that is what they are most accustomed to. But we have some that will use a tablet, others that will use a laptop or a desktop, as long as it has the features that are necessary, which is really just a strong connection to the internet and then a camera and a microphone. So it also has the ability to be really flexible when it comes to the device that you use. And that was a benefit for us when we first started, because as you all know, I mean, you have students sometimes that have devices that are the most recent thing and have the most up-to-date hardware and software, and then others who may not. So the fact that we could send them to a web-based site using Chrome or another browser allowed us to not have to have those conversations to say, well, this would be great for you to use, but your device isn't capable. So that is also a strength that in the setup and the thought process that's there. One other thing about Flipgrid, if you're interested in kind of some of the other details about the actual company and program, it did start as a K-12 tool. And I was in K-12 public education for a little over 10 years before I came to UVA, and that's where I had first used it. Since then, it's gone through a few different iterations, but Microsoft now is the proprietor of Flipgrid. And so all of the Flipgrid support does come from the Microsoft team in terms of that support. They are very helpful, and they are adding multiple features regularly, some of which we use, as you'll hear about, and some of which we really don't tap into a whole lot just because it doesn't fit our learning need.
Kevin, can I interrupt you for 1 second to answer
Absolutely.
Philip's question when he wanted to know about integration in Canvas?
Yes, great question. And Tracy, thank you for that, because I did not see that pop up on my screen. It does have Canvas integration. That being said, I am not going to say yay or nay if it is fully integrated at UVA, simply because in the School of Nursing, we use CoLab. And I know School of Education, a few others use Canvas. I do not know how far that integration goes as far as if it's fully supported, but that is a great question. And Canvas does have a directed integration with that. So I would suggest, you reach out to your IT team or even the UVA IT and ask them about that. Great question though, yes. And thank you, Tracy, for sending that my way.
I'll watch the chat on it.
Thank you. So our integration strategy at the School of Nursing, really just like anything we do as far as instruction, and especially with technology integration, is we want to plan for and design meaningful integrations. So as much as there are a lot of tools available, and a lot of them are really good and helpful, we want to make sure that we're actually using it for something that matters to the students. As all of our students are across every school, they have these value buy-ins and these value judgments of, is this really worth it? Is this a gimmick? Is this not a gimmick? And our initial integration was strictly with graduate level students. So advanced practice students who are all working in a career as a full-time nurse or other type of position in the medical field. A lot of them have multiple things happening, such as care for family and otherwise. And so when we were ready to present Flipgrid as an option for a learning environment, one of the tools we wanted to use, we were very aware of what we were going to say and how we were going to say it to our students, knowing that their time is going to be distributed across what they do, just like with anything, but they're going to put a value on it. So when we thought about that and we discussed it as a team, and we looked at some of the strategies that other places had used for video discussion, we wanted to make sure everything we did had that purpose behind it, and we led with that information. So that's what we introduced. We gave them the clear purpose and the design, and in this case, we were able to connect it to their authentic environment. So this is pre-pandemic that we had started this. And one of our key pieces that we shared with nursing students was, in your environment, telehealth exists currently, and it's only expanding. So one of our pieces was, you will at some point more than likely experience a telehealth situation in which you are going to have to speak to a patient or a family and deliver some sort of information, knowing that most of us are uncomfortable hearing and seeing ourselves on camera or audio. Maybe a little different now because we've been on Zoom so much, but for the most part, that's still most people's experience. So that was one of the things we wanted to share with them, is this is an opportunity for you to experience that in a learning environment that does not have any risk, and you're not performing on your job at that time. The other thing was, with the clear purpose, we always wanted them to know why we were using this tool. And so we leaned into that in the beginning. Even if our students were kind of, like, oh, that's great, we wanted to make sure they knew that. We also provided a practice space for their initial experiences. And I know that our professor will talk a little bit about that. And so the other thing we did is you can add co-pilots and collaborators. So having had the experience with Flipgrid before I came to UVA, I was a collaborator with each of our professors here. and we talked about the setup and the design and the settings and all the pieces that go with it. But then we were also able to add clinical faculty. So in the School of Nursing, we have a lot of our clinical faculty who support 1 or 2 courses. But within that, they are an integral part of the instructional process. And so we were able to add them as a collaborator so they could also see the students' responses and then also respond to the students through the video discussion. So it helped us not only provide this experience for the students, but we could add our clinical faculty who sometimes, in the grand scheme of things, they're connected to the course, but since they're clinical and they're working full-time in their practice, don't always have the opportunity to see what's going on other than in that clinical moment. So it helped us build an instructional community with the instructors and not just the students. And then a few other quick things before I hand it over to Dr. Reyna. We would use this multiple times throughout a course. If it looked like that this might be a one opportunity where we just used it one time, we would actually hold it out of a course because then it just felt like maybe to the students, we were just kind of shoving something in there. And if you only use it one time, not only are you not going to be experienced with the tool, but you may also think, well, what's it really worth? Like, why did I even do that? So we did use it multiple times, and we provided multiple resources for access and use. So I created some resources. We used what was available from the Flipgrid help section. And then, of course, once the Learning Tech website became what it is right now, we were able to redirect and direct folks to that as well. So that was a big help. And then finally, and I know our professors will speak to this too, we listened to the feedback because we all had a little bit of hesitation. At least I know I think that was in our minds a little bit, knowing this was brand new, knowing we were rolling something out that we weren't sure how it would be received. So we listened very closely to that feedback, and we took that, adapted how we presented it, how we created it. But we also encouraged the students to persevere and go through it. Just like we all know, technology, we have multiple levels of comfortability. Some of our students were very comfortable right away, and some of them would express directly to us that they're coming back to school after a longer hiatus. They knew what to do in their work environment, but this new learning type thing they weren't sure about. But we encouraged them, and I really believe that helped us in our process. So I'm going to go ahead and take one moment just to take a glance at the chat, and then we'll go ahead. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Barbara Reyna, and she'll share about her experience with using Flipgrid.
Okay, well, this is an example of, this was probably the first time I had used Flipgrid. And my purpose for this was I wanted some opportunities for the students to connect, particularly because we weren't meeting face-to-face every week. This was a kind of a hybrid format. And I had talked to faculty in other places that had used some different other apps or platforms in order to have the students interact. And I like the idea of this being a video versus something that they had to write, because I feel sometimes the discussion boards, you feel like you have to have it's not really a discussion. It's kind of a pre-written response that gets plugged in. And I wanted something maybe a little more informal. That was just, my take on it. But I also wanted them to be able to put faces and names together and voices. And I also wanted that opportunity for myself as well. So I just came up with some different assignments that required them to do a video response. And some of the feedback was, I don't think there was unfavorable feedback. I think that one student particularly said she doesn't like writing, and being able to sit in front of the computer and just talk about an article that she read, for example, was a lot easier than it was to have to write something out and put pen to paper. So that was probably the most, my first aha moment that some students would actually prefer that. And a lot can be said. You have 10 minutes. They had expanded the time, and the course faculty can set the time limit. And so sometimes it's useful to not give them a lot of time if you don't want to listen to 10 minutes of video. But a lot can be said in 2 minutes, and even less. An introduction, that's usually how I start. Like if they have no experience with Flipgrid, having them introduce themselves to the rest of the class, and then they have to go and meet some of their other colleagues as well, is a good way to get them started. And I've also had them do some role playing. I gave them some assignments where they had to maybe to take a patient problem and explain it to, as if they were talking to, in my field, it would be a parent about a problem. And they got pretty creative. Some of them really got into character and had their lab coats on. And so I also liked it because it gave them an opportunity to express maybe their more creative self as well. I would say it can be cumbersome if you have a lot of students. So for example, if you have 60 students and each one does a 5-minute presentation, you're listening to 5 hours of presentations. And so that can get to be cumbersome, but in small groups, it's very manageable. And I personally rather listen than read. If I'm going to sit there for 2 hours, let me listen instead of reading. I just find that a little more enjoyable on my end. So I've used it for finding a journal and describing a research study. I've had them role playing. I've had one student, I even said, talk to your teddy, take a stuffed animal. Don't focus on the camera, look away. And the students did a nice job. They kind of turned sideways to the camera like this, as if they were talking to a patient. And I think that took some of the nervousness away because they weren't trying to stare into a camera. So I really like it as one option for promoting some connectedness in the classroom. And Linda and Tracy will share their experiences. I don't want to take all their thunder away.
All right, great. Thank you, Dr. Reyna. And now we'll go to Dr. Eastham.
Hello. What is up here is the most recent one that I did, which was in a seminar course, a specialty seminar course, which was really a health promotion course for family nurse practitioner students. And generally, like Dr. Reyna, I also start out with introductions so that people have an opportunity to get more comfortable with using this application. Now, one of the things I did, when you see the one, a reflection on the social determinants of health, that's when I tried to take an in-class conversation. This was a seminar format course. So we had a lot of conversations about the impact of social determinants of health on people's health care, which of course, COVID-19 really came to the forefront there. It was a great example. But I wanted the conversation to continue outside the classroom because we only see each other once a week, and I wanted them to think about this during the week. So we were able to use Flipgrid to help us continue our conversation so that we wouldn't forget things during the week between meeting. Now, in the School of Nursing, which may or may not be different from other schools in the university, our graduate students are nearly always employed, and many of them are employed full time. So they have very busy weeks. And that would be why they might not be thinking about the course content until perhaps the night before the morning of the day the course meets. So I liked the idea of trying to keep them engaged. And I think that it was pretty effective for that. The other thing I did was, when you see the community I serve, a major project we have in the summer course is to really do a community evaluation. And that is, I spend the semester kind of building on what are the social determinants of health, what resources are there available to help people where there is a need related to the social determinants of health, what do we have available in the healthcare system. And the way I have them put this together is with this project so that they can begin formulating ideas of where to send patients for help. So what I had them do was do their presentations about their communities on Flipgrid. And I did give it the longest time. I gave it the 10 minutes per person, but I had a very small class this summer. So it was okay that I did that. And like Dr. Reyna mentioned, I think if you had a large class, that might be really difficult. On the other hand, if you were trying to grade papers, I actually think the paper grading might be more grueling or cumbersome or less enjoyable than being able to listen to them. Now, one of the caveats I learned was, and I need to go back and look at my rubric. I thought my rubric was pretty clear. 50% of it was the information and 50% of your grade was, you know, what your interpretation was, what were your plans, what were you going to do with all this information? Unfortunately, my class as a whole, with several exceptions, but at least 50% of the class did not capture what the rubric were saying. And so their presentations ranged from about half of the students being able to talk about what they would do in their communities and what services were available and how they would use that with their patients. And the other 50% talked a mile a minute to read their slides. So I need to do some more work and try again to help them understand how to better do this presentation on Flipgrid. It can also be used to talk about patient presentations, and in a different course that doesn't show up on this slide. In health assessment, we work on clinical reasoning and we go through presenting patients to help them think about how to organize both how they talk to other professionals and how they organize their thinking. And I did offer this as an option to students, but students seemed they wanted an option, but then they didn't want to use Flipgrid. So I'm going to try it again, but I'm going to be a little more hands-on and directive with that. So I think there's lots of opportunities, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Kelly.
Thank you very much for coming today and listening to us talk about Flipgrid. Really appreciate the opportunity. I want to underscore a couple of things that people have already discussed because I think it's important that students do get a sense, as Kevin presented in the beginning, this is not just something to check off there. I've done this, you know, this is an assignment, I've done it, move on, what's the next thing I have to do? But this is a part of incorporating things that they need to know in their practice as nurse practitioners when they are employed. And so we're not just giving them assignments for the sake of giving them assignments. We're giving them assignments so that they will walk into a role and be able to perform at a higher level. The American Academy of Colleges of Nursing has just sort of moved to this new competency-based education. And so again, Flipgrid allows us to use this tool to help meet some of those competencies. Other things that I wanted to just bring up, it is certainly a way for the students to introduce themselves and for the faculty. And I think one of the things that Dr. Eastham and Dr. Reyna didn't mention is we do it too. So the first time I did it, or the second, or even the third, I stuttered through it. I didn't like the way I looked. I didn't know what I was saying. So we had a real appreciation for what the students go through. And I think it's important to let them know that as well. We've done this. We know it's not easy from the beginning. But it does allow, particularly in the time of COVID, when you might have 40 or 50 postage stamp size students, you get an opportunity to see what they look like, and they get an opportunity to see what you look like. So I think there's value in that, particularly as we're more and more remote. Kevin mentioned the first attempt is casual, it's ungraded. Because I use this throughout my program, not just in one course, but through the 2 or 3 years that I have students, it is a graded, and it's used as a rubrics, as Dr. Eastham mentioned. it is graded through that time. And I think that's important for them to know. Again, this isn't just something for them to do so they can say, okay, I've done that, but they're trying to excel at it. They're trying to improve at it. So it matters what they say and how they say it. One of the things I wanted to mention is that initially, as was sort of suggested, the students don't like it. They don't want to do it. And sometimes they'll even say, oh, Flipgrid again. And I asked, what's wrong with it? Tell me about it. As Kevin mentioned, we listened to them. What don't you like? Tell us what wasn't good. I had to redo it 4 or 5 times. I'm not comfortable with my voice. I didn't know I said, you know, all the time. I wasn't sure what to wear. I wasn't sure if there was some uniform we were supposed to wear. I needed to read the scripts because I didn't know the material very well, right? They had to read it. I needed more time than the video allowed me. Well, when I reflected on some of these comments that the students made, these are all really important self-criticism that are learning opportunities for the students. When they find out that they have these fillers, you know, how come, they stop saying that so much. And it's important when we are interfacing with families, particularly families where English may not be their first language, or they have challenges with healthcare literacy, that we speak succinctly, clearly, cogently, that we make it clear to families what we want them to do, and that they can address any questions to us. So I think it's these hesitancies that the students have sometimes is really an opportunity for them to get better and better at their ability to present information to families. And Kevin mentioned telehealth is not going away. So talking to a computer and looking at yourself and finding out that the flip in your hair is different than you expected, it's fine. That's what's going to happen. So I hope I've gotten you to believe that we are moving into a more professional interaction with families as the students move from a student role to a novice role of a nurse practitioner. And as we incorporate more and more sophistication in this Flipgrid. And I wanted to just give you 3 examples of how I've used it. The first is in the very first practicum. And of course, we do ask them to just introduce themselves. So that's great. And they form a cohort right then and there, right? They begin to see, oh, that person has a dog, or, oh, that person, you know, has a green living room. So do I. I mean, so they begin to form some socialized skills with each other. There was a very large report that just came out recently that was published on the future of nursing. And so in the very first practicum where the students are in their clinical arena, I asked them to look at the report and to talk about 1 or 2 things that this report speaks to as their role of a nurse practitioner. It takes them about somewhere between 2 and 3 years to get through my program. So I thought about these students who ultimately will interface with hospital administrators and system managers. What about this report speaks to them in the role of the nurse practitioner? And to do that in 4 minutes. That's really not easy. As they move to the very last practicum, then as Linda mentioned, we asked them to tell us about maybe a new diagnosis. How would they present education to a family member who has just received a new diagnosis? So in my case in pediatrics, we might have a family member who has just learned that their child has sickle cell disease. What are the salient issues on that diagnosis that a family member has to know about in the first month of that child's diagnosis? So it allows them both education about a particular subject, as well as how to put together some pieces that are really important. I did want to mention one other way that I used it, because we talked about smaller groups. I did have a fairly large health policy course at one point. And what I did with that is I broke them into groups of 4, and we had essentially a Lincoln Douglas debate. The groups of 4 interchanged about an argument, and 2 examples that I would use is we talked about the Affordable Care Act and whether states should have the right to opt out of Medicaid expansion. And so one student presented for 5 minutes on yes, they should be able to opt out. The second student presented on no, why they should not. The third student responded to the first and the fourth student responded to the second. And so it was a typical Lincoln Douglas debate, but it allowed me to see one Flipgrid all in a quick little, I don't know, grouping, but there were 4 people involved, and we had, I think, 8 or 10 different subjects. One I know had to do with whether direct-to-consumer prescription advertising should be allowed. So they did the same sort of thing. So you can use Flipgrid in larger groups, but you just have to find a couple of different ways that you could do that. So that's how I've used it. I'm happy to take any questions or how we worked it out. I hope this has been helpful to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Kelly, and thank you all for sharing. Yeah, go ahead. We have a question. Go ahead, Philip.
Yes. Tracy, what you just said about that debate, Affordable Care Act, I find that interesting, something that I think probably many of us can use for about different topics. So can you explain a little bit more, how does that look like? Because so this is online, right? So every student sits on their screen, I mean, in their room, and they're...
So you can respond to a video. So if you have a video, then I can respond to your video. Somebody else can respond to my video, and then somebody can respond to that last one. So it's straight down, as if you look at the right side of if you have it in this format that I have, Philip will speak, Tracy will respond, Barbara will respond to Tracy, and Linda will respond to Barbara. And so they all can listen to the same thing.
It's not live. I think that's your question. This is an assignment that they have to post within a certain period, and then someone has to, so almost like a discussion board, but it's a video.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And you're right. That's a good point. So I was waiting, the second person had to wait for the first person to hear what was their argument. How did they argue this point?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to give dates, time limit.
First, I make a little video that says, okay, Affordable Care Act is something that every state should do, and that's my point. I make that recording, and then you react to it, and you
Correct.
recording. They know you're wrong. Blah 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 blah.
Well, you can do it in a variety of ways. In Lincoln Douglas, what you would do is the first person would say, "This is the reason why they should be allowed to opt out." The second person would say, "This is the reason why they should not be allowed to opt out," and then the last 2 would respond to each of those.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's a good idea. Okay.
And that's a great question. So, Philip, I'm actually sharing, and you guys can let me know if you can see it. So this is Tracy's, this is the actual course that we did that in. And so you'll see we have the Affordable Care Act, and then prescription medications, health benefits, Medicaid expansion, and individual mandate. And then within, say, prescription medications, Brooke provided the last response. You'll see that was June 4th. But Lindsay started all of the responses on May 26th. So Lindsay put her post in, which I was probably the pro argument.
Correct.
Ryan then, once Lindsay had posted, you could see Ryan's is a couple days later. So then Ryan responded to what she was saying, but he didn't actually respond directly. So as Barbara pointed out, and as Tracy clarified, he had his own preparation that he had done. And so he was ready to present the con of that topic. And then Azra was, you could see, a week later before that student responded. And so the third student responded to the first and the fourth to the second. And I will say, in working with Tracy, Tracy had, it was a brilliant idea. And what really we spent the most time on is thinking through the timetable. What was a realistic time frame for the first student to respond? And then by the time we got to the last student, because we wanted to make sure that the discussion and the back and forth didn't lose its traction or meaning. And so we kept it within a week and a half to 2 weeks at the most. But all of the students in each group filled it out in the right time frame. And I have to say, I had never seen this type of thing done on Flipgrid, and I think it went well. And so it was one of those moments that I believe we had where we thought, oh, this this is something we could not have done with the class time that Tracy had with them. Her FaceTime with them was not going to allow this to take place, but they could continue discussions in Flipgrid in this format and not just have a talk, but actually share vital points and almost present, like she said, that real debate. But that's what that format looked like when we built that.
Can I ask a quick follow-up, Kevin, and maybe Tracy as well? I'm looking at Lindsay, and Lindsay has 31 views. Were other students doing stuff with these videos? And obviously, the first person that goes gets the most screen time, because I see Brooke only had 11 views. So how did you manage? What was the process? Why were people looking at this?
So Lindsay was the first. Lindsay and Ryan had a pro and con debate. That meant Ezra and Brooke had to listen maybe more than once to what they had to say, because they're responding to it. So it doesn't tell you who listened to it. It only tells you how many times. I certainly listened to my students because I had to grade them. So one of them or two of them is mine. Certainly Ezra and Brooke listened to it more than once because they wanted to sort of take notes. And anybody in the class would view it as well. They might say, well, I'm not interested in I had to do my own debate, but I want to go over there and see what did they discuss about prescription medications and the ACA. So anybody in the class could view it as well.
But they weren't required to.
The other people in the class were not required to, but you can tell from this, they probably did.
Yeah. Well, you could imagine just a follow-up to it of pick one of these other things that you didn't participate in and watch them and maybe provide your own reaction to it.
Correct. Well, the other thing, is you also had a rebuttal. You might want to listen to how did other people,
right?
Not on the subject that I had to participate in, but on some other subject. How did they do that rebuttal? How did they answer it? So they all, I think, learn from listening to each other.
Thank you.
So these recordings, they exist. So you could still use them for some reason. So it's not that the four students that we see here are the only ones who have seen them, but you can use them and then say, bring the debate to the larger class. Could you do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Of course you could.
Of
course you could. Yeah.
Kevin, do you know, can you block certain students out? Say you don't, want them to know what the other group did. Is that possible?
So that level of who can and can't access is not going to be something you could do in this.
Okay.
You would have to share a specific code that you only shared with those other students that then would isolate that group. Now, that's my understanding. They did recently do some serious updates, though, with their kind of, dashboard for the instructors. So that now may be something that you can do to isolate to those specific groups.
I would also add, not so much if you're going to use this several times, but for like introductions, I introduce myself. So I don't make them do anything that I'm not willing to do. So I put my face on the camera as much as they do. And I have actually video recorded my response to them on Flipgrid. And because sometimes it's just easier for me to talk it than it is to write it. So there's a number of ways that you can approach it.
I want to go back and make the point about increasing sophistication too, because when I said, they wondered what they were supposed to wear, the very first time they really had no idea. And we did have people showing up in their pajamas, they're walking around, their dog is barking,
It's the whole Zoom thing.
It is the whole Zoom thing. But as we moved on through the program and we talked more and more about interviewing and things of that sort, then suddenly they look different on Flipgrid. They were more aware of how they came across, how they spoke, what they wore, what was behind them. And they realized the importance of that in interview. And I think that's helped in their interviewing skills as well as they were looking for employment.
All right. Well, great. Thank you. Great questions and points. And we'll have more time for questions here in just a moment. I do want to just confirm and make sure you can see the slides now again.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I did that right this time. So just a few things, and I'm not going to repeat if any of these have already been said. I'm not going to reiterate them, but we did have students have some challenges with login. And as many of you know, anytime you start using a new tool or a new platform, you're going to have those moments where you have to work out the pieces. One of those was whether or not they should use Google or Microsoft. So initially, when we very first started, I was in contact with ITS, and they had, at the moment, they were working on the actual UVA sign-in integration. So we were slightly ahead of that. And when we did that, we were just able to leave it what's considered a public option. And so if you choose to use Flipgrid, it defaults to public. Again, coming from the K-12 environment, Flipgrid was very good because it was almost like a controlled discussion that you could have between your students and students anywhere in the world, but it was protected in a way that it wasn't social media, and we had to actually submit student emails to it. But the public side, since all of our users were not in a K-12 environment, it could be shared with anyone. So initially, the sign-in process was just very simple. They used an email they wanted to. We never saw their email address. They signed in. But once we had the UVA connection, which is much better than just kind of the free-for-all, they had the option to sign into Google or Microsoft. And so initially, I just told the students, well, use Microsoft, because in my mind, that's what I used to sign in. That's what the faculty were using. And then someone reminded me, but Kevin, the students use they use Google for Education as their like sign-in thing. So I had put out all this information, put Microsoft, use Microsoft, and then students were like, I can't get in. So we had one of those moments, but it also helped us, especially me as the support person, to kind of pause and say, okay, we really need to make sure, because I was confident in what we were doing as far as the actual activity, but we had to just kind of pause, and I had to say, let me revisit to make sure I'm getting those steps accurate. But once we cross that hurdle, we're fine. One other slight wrinkle that we have every once in a while, and this probably doesn't apply to anyone else, but I want to share it. We have some health system employees. And so we get into that dance of the HSC and all that kind of stuff. But I want to commend the ITS team who went with us on this ride. And as I'm emailing them and I'm like, we can't get in, and they're helping, it was really good. And so I just want to reiterate, the fact that UVA supports this platform gives us that in-house support for troubleshooting that we wouldn't have if we used a tool that wasn't a part of our own system. We've already talked about the experience, and we do have other faculty that have used it. I want to say that Dr. Reyna, Dr. Eastham, and Dr. Kelly are some of our, front runners when we talk about trying new things for nursing education. They jumped right in and they went with it, and they saw the value. Their testimony to our other faculty about the quality of the student work, how the experience was, brought other faculty on board. So now we have undergraduate students using this with their professors. We have an RN to BSN program that uses it. That's an online program. Our clinical nurse leader program utilizes this. And other faculty have given us some feedback, just anecdotal, but the feedback really has been, they love to hear the students express their passion and their knowledge in a way that, like Barbara said, it doesn't always come across in writing. And it's not that they're not good writers, but when you hear it and sense it, you know that that's really sinking in. And so that's been good for us as well. We have been able to be more creative with our activities, and the majority of student feedback is positive. Even with some of the students who still remain, uncomfortable with it, it's still something that we have found value in. And we did do a quick, just in-house survey of a small cohort of students, and the overwhelming amount of them responded in the survey and said it was a positive thing, that they valued what these activities did. And I want to pause here too and say that Tracy and Barbara and Linda, all of them, when we started this, knew that this was going to take a little bit of time on their part. and my part working together to build something that was of value. So if you're considering doing this, or you're thinking, what's my trade-off here? How much time does this take? It honestly does not take very long to actually set up a discussion. It's very straightforward. But where you're going to want to spend your time is something that I said in the beginning, and that is really thinking about, what do I want my students to be discussing and saying, and how can this experience complement and enhance their learning with the content I'm delivering? There are some courses that all of our professors teach that, when you really think about it, may not lend itself as well to use Flipgrid. So in that case, we may look at another tool. So we're not also trying to see how many places we can just fit it in, but we know that it works well, so we want to use it as we can. And with that, I'm going to share, and we'll make sure that everyone has this. You can find all of us through the email system, our nursing website. We'd be happy to answer any further questions you have, anything that you'd like to talk about or ask about. I believe we have roughly 10 minutes left. And I'd also be happy to show any other courses or any other details of what Flipgrid kind of looks like. So, and Dr. Reyna, Dr. Eastham, and Dr. Kelly, if there's anything else you'd like to share, please feel free.
I have a question. Comes back to something Tracy said about students not liking this. But I'm impressed with how tightly integrated the work you've done is tied to learning objectives and competencies within your profession. I'm curious what students would have preferred doing if it weren't Flipgrid. I mean, obviously there's the in-person, but that was out of the question. Was there something else that they said, wow, we'd rather do that instead?
I think they're more comfortable just writing things up and then reading them, rather than somewhat extemporaneously talking.
So they could polish them and make it perfect and make them sound the way they sound in their head.
Type it up and have it in the right font and everything.
But of course, we don't get to do that in real life, right?
Not in reality, not when a patient comes in and suddenly you've got to go in there and see them and present back to your preceptor. That's the way it is. So I think that's the thing that surprised them. And it was the initial ones where they were reluctant. They said, well, we can't talk on the fly. And so I think it was a learning opportunity for them to realize that is what your job will be in the future. So figure out now if that's what you want to do, because there's no turning back.
If you can't do this, you're not going to be able to do it in front of a live person.
Right.
I think also building on it, being able to use it early on where they develop some comfort, and then as the assignment or I guess the assignment gets more complex and maybe a little more risky, then you either can run into problems if they're not comfortable with it, but if they've had some experience, then perhaps it helps. Because I felt like none of the students had a negative comment about it. They didn't say they didn't want to do it. They didn't moan. It was just the assignment. So I think you have to also think about, what they have to do to prepare and what the risk is for them to be on camera.
I do want to make one important comment, and Barbara and I are taking the same class in the Center for Teaching and Learning, about feedback. Again, you do. Oh, Philip, I'm sorry. I see your hand up. Did you want to ask something?
No, I think my hand is still up from like 30 minutes ago. I didn't realize that. Sorry, I'll take
No
it,
problem.
see if I can take it down.
Okay.
My hand, sorry. Yeah.
No problem. What I wanted to say, though, is that it is important to give them feedback. Otherwise, they do think it's just an assignment, or we're not listening to it, or it's not important. So on the case where I did the report, the Future of Nursing report, the first person, and I always praise the first person who tries it, right? The first person who tries it got out there and did it, and the rest waited on that person. But I did send a video chat back to that person who didn't identify where in the report she read the aspect that she was going to address. I wanted her to tell me a little bit more about it. And so while this was, very graciously done and sensitively done, she heard that there were missing pieces of what I had asked for. And so she got to redo it. She got to correct it. She got to add to it. And then the next person that got the benefit of seeing what I had spoken to her about, they then immediately said, well, on chapter 5, section 2. And so they were learning individually from themselves, and they were learning collectively. But I think it's really important to give them feedback. I think, you know, when they think they've done something and nobody's listening, there's no point.
I just wanted to add one more thing to that, and that is the only time I heard some of the things that Tracy has been sharing, like, oh, I had to redo this 9 times, because I did hear that. And I don't like the way I look. And I had students who put the camera on their dog or on a tree or whatever because they didn't want to be seen. That all went away when the pandemic hit and we moved to Zoom. In fact, I think the Flipgrid helped some people because they'd already been there, done that once, twice, 3 times, however many. And so I think Flipgrid's not nearly the agonizing, oh my gosh, you're going to see me and hear me on camera as it was pre-pandemic. So in that regard, I guess COVID-19 helped open some opportunities for us, not ones we really wanted to have, but.
Good point.
Yeah, and again, we thank you for the questions, and if you have any more, please ask. We have a few minutes left, and we do look forward to how we can continue to use this in the future, especially as Tracy had said, as our kind of nursing curriculum leading things, the essentials are all going to competency based, and it's also exciting for us to hear about what others are doing. So if any of you are connected to another school or another course and you're using it, or you hear anything or see anything, let us know. I know that this is something the university has, and more people are starting to explore it. So as much as we can also build community together in that way, we would love to. I know sometimes with nursing, it kind of has its own nuances because of the fact that it's very much seen as like a medical type of a thing. But a lot of what we're doing, as Philip pointed out, are sometimes things that other schools can use, and we know there are other ideas out there that we can benefit from as well. So we'd love to collaborate. And I also want to say, if you have any other things you'd like to see, I'm happy to stick on a few minutes afterward, even after our time may be up, if that's something anyone would like to do. So any other closing thoughts or final thoughts or questions?
I have another question, and that's more about the tool itself. And I'm curious from the instructors, are there things that Flipgrid does that annoy the heck out of you, or things that it doesn't do that you wish it would?
There's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can use your own personal camera and video. I have a MacBook Air, and so there were a couple ways of doing it. When I didn't realize that at first, so I felt like it said 2, 3, 1. Then you had to start your video. You can go off. You can do your own video on your own camera at your own time, and then upload it there. So I think that's actually a nice feature, especially if you're more comfortable with your own camera on your own computer. You don't have to use theirs. So that's a good feature that I like. It was not hard. Kevin's correct. It wasn't difficult to navigate. There's an educational mode. Is that correct, Kevin? Or there's a student mode and then education. You have to go into each one to view your students and one to operate the platform itself. They are updating. They used to have 3 minutes and they had 5 minutes. Now it's 10 minutes. Sorry, Barbara.
I think there are some idiosyncrasies. It's pretty intuitive, but it had been a while since I had set one up. And the other night I was trying to set up our introduction one for the genetics course. And not only did it take me like 5 videos to get one that I liked of my own introduction, I had the dog, and but it took me a little while to re-navigate the site. For students that want a step-by-step, click here, click here, click here, I don't know what it looks like on the student side. And I felt a little uncomfortable because I'm not sure. I'm hoping they'll all figure it out. Here's the click here, here's your code, and they'll get it. But I just said, text, email me if you're stuck. But it does take a little bit of practice, I think.
One of the things I like about it, which might sound silly, but I've tried using my phone and I've tried using my iPad, and I prefer the phone because I can hold it in one hand. I have gone outside. I've stood out back or out front when a tree was flowering so that I could have a pretty background. Sometimes just the ambient noises of the birds and all that sort of thing kind of make it a lot more, I don't know, pleasant or whatever. So I really like the opportunities for creativity. And some of the students who are more creative and more daring will do things like that. It doesn't have to be, gee, let me sit in front of a big computer and be at a desk and look really formal if the occasion doesn't call for that. So I think it gives lots of possibilities for creativity.
And there's still the K through 12 stickers and hats and things that you can put on it yourself.
Yeah, that and to that point that Dr. Reyna just brought up, it was a K-12 tool with the idea that their interface was designed so a kindergartner could interact effectively.
Yeah, well, a lot of those are smarter than we are sometimes.
Yeah, I was probably overthinking it.
Well, but I mean, and I think that's one of the interesting aspects of a tool like this, that their user experience design is thinking about, can a 5 to 6 year old use this on a kindergarten type device, which would usually be a tablet, all the way up through, for a while their slogan was pre-K to PhD, all the way up through graduate highest level learners and everybody in between there. So yes, it does have all kinds of stickers and backgrounds and stuff because it's like a safe social media area. But at the same time, to Linda's point too, there are some students that actually would use that, for their still image, and it added the community and it added character to what they were doing. And I think personally, in a time of also, a lot of social media use, it gives them that experience of when and when not to in a professional type of a role, to Linda's point, because social media is such a big deal. And if I'm responding to an important question, should I put my picture with a, sombrero on right now, or maybe I shouldn't do that? And I know that's minor, but it does help. And so I will say, although I'm not one of the course instructors, from support side, I think one of my biggest challenges is when they do make a change in the interface, or they make a slight nuance where instead of doing this, it's that. And although it's almost the same, it's not the same. And so just trying to make sure I can keep that in the minds of our learners who use it. And so I try to do all kinds of tests, but at the same time, looking to Flipgrid's resources to be able to do that. And they're not as bad as some other platforms with their regular updates. They usually don't do that type of thing to us, but yeah, so I would just throw that in there as well, is some of those updates. All right. Well, at this point, it is 3 o'clock, so I'm going to end our recording and say thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.